Hi, I'm Neil Fox, creator of the Lucifer series on YouTube. This is Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson 5, which should be viewed with Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson 6, both of which discuss the possible occult meaning of the year 223 by objective time calculation that opens the second chapter of Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson by G.I. Gurdjieff. As far as I know, I'm the only one who has this interpretation. I can only Google around and see what people are talking about. If someone else is coming from the same place I am, I came up with it on my own, independent of anything else, just my own study. Now, a lot of you might be wondering why I appear in this video as blue. That's because I am a blue person. Okay, I dropped some clues about this in Lucifer on Tantra. I'm a member of the original mystic race that first introduced knowledge on this planet originally. And we're known amongst ourselves as the Blue Thread Warlock Group. And we're blue. Gurdjieff describes a fight he got into with this kid when he was a boy who
immediately leaped at me and with a full swing struck me in the face with his fist. From this blow I, as is said, saw stars, and at the same time my mouth became as full as if it had been stuffed with the food necessary for the artificial fattening of 1,000 chickens. After a little time, when both these strange sensations had calmed down within me, I then actually discovered that some foreign substance was in my mouth, and when I pulled it out with my fingers, it turned out to be nothing less than a tooth of large dimensions and strange form. This strange tooth had 7 shoots, and at the end of each of them there stood out in relief a drop of blood, and through each separate drop there shone clearly and definitely one of the 7 aspects of the manifestation of the white ray.
And they go to the local barber, who's the guy who extracts teeth in the village, and the barber tells him the tooth's a wisdom tooth. Well, the Hebrew letter Shin can be represented by a tooth, and it's the number 300, and symbolizes the what Christians call the Holy Spirit, the Ruach Elohim of the Jews, the breath or spirit of God.
Video.
Piece of crap video over with. Sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me.
Yes, speaking of Armenian, Mr. G's beloved language, I should like to point out that the number 223, transliterated into Armenian letters, comes to the English equivalents of MIG if it is Eastern Armenian, or MIK if one is using the Western dialect. But it is Eastern Armenian that concerns us, Classical Armenian, and this the Google translator would pronounce Lee. Anglicizing that would come out
Meg.
Either way, it is short for Mikhail or Mikhaili or Mikhail or Mikhaili, which in any case is the Armenian way of saying Michael. So you see, saying
Me.
is the same as an American saying Mike for Michael. Michael, of course, and all its variants in all the languages of the world, derives originally from the Hebrew
Mikoai.
Considering that the text here is about an alien named Beelzebub, perhaps it is not too big a leap to suggest that
Me.
might be an allusion to the archangel Michael, the highly mythical champion who countered Satan's revolt in heaven and sent the so-called devil falling to earth way back when. This would be in keeping with forging a conjunction of opposites, I should think, which is central to Beelzebub's law of three. So there you have it. 223 means Mike. Oh, and it's at least interesting to point out that
Me.
spelled backwards, spells the English equivalent of G-I-M, gem, the Armenian letter for three. Actually, this interesting fact puts the question out of all doubt for the Lucifer series. Three could not be more central to Beelzebub, or more central to Kabbalah, just as reading the letters backwards would be reading it the way one reads Hebrew.
You're not just arguing with me about this if you don't think Kabbalah plays a role in Gurdjieffian thought. You're arguing with John Bennett. He mentioned it in passing, said it was undeniable that Kabbalah was an influence. So it's just in what manner is it an influence? You're supposed to dig for it and figure it out, all right? My argument is fairly well iron tight. What people don't understand is that Armenian and Hebrew both, when you're writing about a letter, you will spell the phoneme for that letter. We don't do that in English. We don't have a word that's H that we spell in a sentence. We just put the letter in quotes when we're talking about the letter. But in Hebrew and Armenian both, they actually have a word for gem. And it only has one spelling. You can check that out. You can Google it and go to Wikipedia and look at the table. There's only one spelling for gem, and it's the spelling that appears in this video. Okay. And if you, their way of shortening, their way of saying Michael, Meg, I'm anglicizing it. I can't pronounce it like the Armenians actually speak, but you spell that backwards, and it is gem, and gem does represent three. Keep in mind that Gurdjieff was fond of being called Mr. G, and I think that amused him for a number of reasons. Okay. And Mikhail, or Mikhail, the Hebrew Michael, means who is like God, and I'll talk about that some other time. Who is like God? All right. It's usually presented as a question. Who is like God? Oh, nobody's like God. Sometimes it's put, who is like all?
Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, Chapter 1, The Arousing of Thought, page 9. But the pot is not yet full, for I have not yet decided the most important question of all. In which language to write? Although I have begun to write in Russian, nevertheless, as the wisest of the wise, Mullah Nasr ad-Din would say, in that language you cannot go far. The Russian language, it cannot be denied, is very good. I even like it, but only for swapping anecdotes and for use in referring to someone's parentage.
Nothing quite says son of a bitch like saying son of a bitch in Russian.
The Russian language is like the English, which language is also very good, but only for discussing in smoking rooms while sitting on an easy chair with legs outstretched on another, the topic of Australian frozen meat or sometimes the Indian question.
Hell, 70% of all information stored anywhere in the world is in English. Well, our proudest achievement is when American English took over the term Madonna. Huh? Think about it. Who thinks of the Virgin Mary anymore, huh? We all know who we think about when we think Madonna.
And then he rambles on and on. Let me skip to page 14. He talks about his native Greek, and he loves Armenian. He was fluent in Armenian. He was Greek-Armenian by descent. And both these languages, he could express anything he wants to in philosophically, and so use that as your biggest clue, folks. All right. Like you or me or anyone, you're going to use your own language, okay, or the language you feel closest to. He felt closest to Greek and Armenian, okay? So don't let him fool you. But he goes on about old Armenian, where before it became so ensconced in a Russian culture and so forth and so on. And he means that sincerely enough, I'm sure. But it's also an allusion to, and as far as I'm concerned, to Eastern classical Armenian. Says the same thing about Greek. He loves Greek, but it's changed in the last 30 years. And I'm sure he's right in that too, okay? But, I mean, he means it. But also, it's an allusion to classic Greek, where the letters could stand for numbers, okay? Like in the Hebrew alphabet stands for numbers, and this is all code, okay? Now, even Russian, at one time in its history, the letters could stand for numbers, okay? But he doesn't go on about old Russian.
Sensuka. Now that's Russian for son of a bitch.
And then, but there's really no original Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. He became indifferent to the idea of a Russian version of the book. He didn't care. All right. Toward the end of his life, it was all this edition, okay, that he approved of. The only edition of Beelzebub that he approved of was in English. He saw the English language taking over the world, and he scribbled notes in Russian and in Armenian for the purpose of getting it translated into English, even though he says in the Arousing of Thought that English is some, so what? Who cares? Big yawn. Most people who read Gurdjieff know that Beelzebub cannot be taken literally. They know that absolutely everything he's talking about is allegorical, including when he's talking about himself. And there's either he's an old man who just rambles a lot in a free associative way about language to no purpose or point at all, or he goes on and on about old Armenian as opposed to new Armenian and old Greek as opposed to new Greek, because he's trying to say something about how to really dig into the bowels of this book.
Asshola. That's a Russian trying to say asshole.
Beelzebub is derived from the Latin word Beelzebub, okay, and Beelzebub is derived from the Greek word Beelzebul, and Beelzebul is derived from the original Hebrew, Beelzevuv. In this, the Hebrew letter Beit stands for the number 2 and is repeated 3 times. And keep in mind that Beit can be pronounced B or V, Beelzevuv. So you have 2 pronounced 2 different ways, but repeated as a letter 3 times. 2, 2, 3.
There are 22 letters to the Hebrew alphabet, each letter representing a number, and the number itself possessing an archetypal meaning for students of the Kabbalah. In this, 3 could not be more significant. There are 3 rows of numbers in this system, with the total summing to 3 times 3, 3 times. Of course, this amounts to 27 letters, not just 22, doesn't it? But the surplus is about repeating the same phonemes Kaf, Mem, Nun, Fe, and Zadi. They are simply reconfigured, and in Hebrew writing are only used when such a letter appears at the end of a word. The letters themselves, called finales or terminals, may have simply been created to make their number equivalents work with the alphabet. The idea that there are only 22 letters is sacrosanct in Hebrew, and as I say, the logic of 3 is the syntax by which the system operates. So there you have it, the key to the year 223 as the Lucifer series would approach it.
But what does it mean? Explain the year 223 in terms of this kind of gematria.